On the 4th of August, 2019, a player named Jeffrey Colon would step into the pit for the very first time. Unbeknownst to him, in about a year's time, he would be botting more efficiently than any player to come before him or anyone who will precede him. Before he would quit in late 2021, Colon would have botted the most gold any player has ever had, then the fastest Uber streak anyone ever will, gained the 6th highest streak ever hit in the game, and with how much he impacted the economy, he would have left his mark forever. And although he eventually reached this point, his pit journey begins just like any other. Colon had quit twice before he actually started playing the game. The first time at Prestige 0, then the second time at Prestige 2. The third time, he really played the game. He garnered about 5 Prestiges in a day, and this was before the 1.0 update, and didn't quit again until around Prestige 16. After he came back, he discovered OQ Minebot, a program which lets you connect lots of alts to Hypixel and was key for botting at the time. And after meeting Kadekon, the fastest streaker, and Hazelis, the greatest botter of her time, he was soon disillusioned to the pit and saw its true nature of botting and cheating. And considering how bad the current state of the game is with cheating, this video is sponsored by VapeV4, a ghost client for Minecraft, and what is 100% the best cheat client for Pit as of this recording. If you want the upper hand, or simply wish to compete in a game mode filled with cheaters and b-hoppers, then click the link in the description for 10% off, or use code BOMP at checkout at vape.gg. But anyways, now that Colon had been acquainted with cheating and botting, his turn to the dark side had begun, and his rise to power was only starting. Starting with the ability to run 30 bots, Jeffrey Colon would bot with a player named Only Skillet, and soon after he helped Kadekon reach Prestige 27 on the infamous account Agender. However, Jeffrey eventually quit again due to the toxicity and harassment he was receiving in the pit. After the 1.0 update though, he would return, and this is when Jeffrey Colon made it big. In May of 2020, Jeffrey Colon would return on the infamous account Revivalism, abusing a bong method called tactical insertion boosting. And with the help of players Master Center and Healthy Diets, Jeffrey Colon would reach Prestige 8 on a new account. Eventually though, Master Center got banned, and now that he was taking a break, the center of focus shifted to Jeffrey. Through streaking and hunting, he reached Prestige 20, at which point he had the ability to do an Uber streak. Before the 1.0.5 update, the fastest way to grow your net worth, if you manage to reach 400 kills with the Uber streak mega streak, you are rewarded an Uber drop. An Uber drop contains items which are very valuable, and the strategy at the time was to grind them out as fast as you could to grow your net worth at the fastest possible rate. Now that Jeffrey was attempting to Uber, he was getting stomped by all of the current groups, but after Master Center rejoined and began to protect him while he Ubered, he was starting to gain more power and beginning to have actual good items. Eventually, they met Oddman, who would later go on to help Jeffrey in his hard botting endeavors, and it got to a point where they were almost constantly Ubering, and Jeffrey began to cheat incredibly hard and was the first people to utilize auto-blocking with a Duelist 3 Bruiser 3, which is a sword which has 2 enchants that are buffed incredibly hard by auto-blocking and made him ridiculously strong. He was gaining power fast, and at the height of this, he enchanted the best gold sword to ever be enchanted in the game, an Executioner 3 Moctezuma 3 gold boost 2. This sword is worth about $2,000 USD in the IRL trading market, and is formally known in the Pit community as the Colon sword. Unfortunately, at this point he made a mistake and lent it to Major Event for him to make a video, at which point Minor Event scammed the sword entirely. And if things were not bad enough already, on November 30th of 2021, through a staff checker which secretly had a token logger in it, the player known as Max gained access to Master Diets, stole every item, and got banned for a year. After this event, Master Center quit and didn't come back for a while. Healthy Diets quit and has not been seen since. And in Jeffrey Colon's own words, this is where the game begun. Starting back up from nothing, this is where Jeffrey Colon's rise to power truly began. The IRL market of the game was up, and Jeffrey Colon saw this. He knew the potential, and he had to start somehow. Starting in dead lobbies which have no other players, and using 5 bots, slowly but surely, he bought an account up to Prestige 20. And now that he was Prestige 20, he could bot Uber streaks and sell the drops for money. Doing this, he was making about $8 an hour. Unfortunately though, since he was new to buying Ubers, he was banned in only a few days. This would not stop him, however. He realized that he could be using much more than 5 bots, but the problem with using more than 5 bots is the more bots you have, the more likely the lobby is to open up, and if the lobby opens up and allows players to join, your chance of getting banned greatly increases. And Jeffrey Cullen, being Jeffrey Cullen, thought to himself, is it possible to fill the entire lobby with bots to stop anyone from joining? And he asked everyone who used to bot, including Katacon, Hazel, Spake, and Godtier, and they all said that he was crazy and that it was not possible. They did not know how wrong they would be. The first obvious problem is that although Jeffrey could pull about 30 bots into a lobby, he needed 80. On Hypixel, you could only warp 24 players at a time, and obviously that is not enough to fill all 80 slots. But with the help of 3 botters, he managed to do it. For the first time, he had gone all 80 slots filled with bots. The only problem though is since he had 3 other botters, it wasn't super efficient. TNT, the main source of killing bots at the time, was not cutting it, and he was not going fast enough. On top of this, he needed all 3 other people to stay online, otherwise the slot would open, and he would get reported and banned. So Jeffrey, once again being Jeffrey, thought to himself, what if he could do it all on his own computer, using just his computer to bring 79 bots into a lobby? Jeffrey's computer was terrified of what he was about to do, but Jeffrey knew that he would succeed. After hours and days of trial and error, he did it. With 4 separate parties, he managed to pull 81 players into one pit lobby, from fully dead to completely full, with no other person other than himself. Not one player had the ability to access the server, and due to the nature of pit lobbies, not even staff could access his lobby. This is where the era of Devilchix botting began. He practically invented it because Devilchix was considered inefficient by most standards, as no one had enough bots, but for Ubering, it was perfect. It was the fastest and the least laggy way to kill all 80 bots, and they didn't have to run to one area. His botting was rapidly escalating, and Almond and a few others were in on it. When they began botting, he bought a Volley 1 Devilchix 2, and after that, a Volley 1 Devilchix 3. It took 1 bow shot from this bow to kill all 80 bots. He was doing Ubers in about 20 seconds, for 30 minutes at a time, and in this time, he was making about $80 every hour. This time period lasted for about 2 weeks until they began to see some complications. Staff were beginning to catch on to what he was doing, especially Pencil, and even more importantly, Mr. Keith. Pencil, they could dodge easily, as he was on skyblock or sleeping the majority of the time. They had friends who had both of these staff on their friends list, so they could avoid it. Mr. Keith, however, ruined everything for about 2 weeks. Mr. Keith, being one of the only competent staff on the server, banned about 20 of their Prestige 20 accounts, which they needed to Uber. Cullen would like to clarify that he had no malicious intent with what I'm about to say, but since Keith was such a big problem, doing things that probably aren't that good, they figured out they now had the information of when Keith was awake, meaning they had a very big span of time in which they could bot freely. At this point, they were botting without issue. They had thousands of cactus, hundreds of feathers, and too many gems to deal with. Their supply was so great that in order to sell it all, they had to sell at half market value. If 64 cactus sold for $25, they sold it for 10. If a feather was 3, they sold it for less than 1.5. And he was still making $70 an hour from people constantly buying from him. Jeffrey, being a dumbass, decided to upload some of this footage, and immediately people were competing with him in how they were buying. A person named Dombear started buying the same way he was, a little less efficiently, but was competing with his prices nonetheless. The group kind of fell apart due to how often their lobbies were getting checked, and obviously banned. And after making about $5,000 in 3 or 4 weeks, the group disbanded. After botting the highest amount of gold any player has ever seen, getting an account to Prestige 20 in less than 2 hours, destroying the IRL economy and changing the game forever, making $5 grand in just a couple of weeks off Minecraft, and doing much, much more, Jeffrey Cullen could finally retire, having cemented himself as the greatest botter that the pit will ever see.